Earlier this month, horrific details emerged in the death of a 19-year-old Penn State sophomore, Timothy Piazza. Piazza was a member of the fraternity Beta Theta Pi and died during a party involving a drinking initiation ritual for fraternity pledges. 18 students at Penn State are now facing charges in connection with Piazza's death, and the fraternity's been permanently banned from the university. According to the indictment, just before midnight, a fraternity member wrote in a group text message that Piazza, quote, might actually be a problem. It says he fell 15 feet down a flight of stairs, hair first, going to need help, close quote. Fraternity members then treated Piazza like a roadkill and put a backpack filled with books on his back to weigh him down and make sure he didn't choke on his own vomit. And that wasn't until 10:48 a.m. the next morning that anyone at the fraternity called an ambulance. Joining me now to discuss this case is Andrew Lowes, a former fraternity member at Dartmouth University and author of Confessions of an Ivy League Frat Boy. Andrew, how does this case compare to some of the fraternity behavior that you studied as you looked at this, as you created this book? And I know you've done a lot of research on this. How does this case compare?
You know, I think that this case kind of falls in the middle of what can happen on any given night of the week at any kind of school in America, whether a small state school or a big Ivy League college. The drinking and the groupthink, the secrecy and the peer pressure, power dynamics that are part and parcel of fraternities, you know, are a constant problem. And I think that we can see that across the board.
Well, in recent years, prosecutors have become more aggressive in going after fraternities. I think it's 2015. There were 22 frat members at, I think it was Northern Illinois University, were convicted of misdemeanor charges in the death of a freshman student. And in this Piazza case, some of the members are actually facing aggravated assault charges. Do you think these charges are having any kind of impact on the way that fraternities operate going forward?
Well, it's a little bit too soon to kind of try to assess and measure whether, you know, this new prosecutorial point of view on fraternities is going to have an impact. But what I will say is that we're long past due for, you know, some kind of real accountability and responsibility taking for fraternities, not just as organizations, and, you know, they are large national corporations, but as the individuals who make them up, who make the decisions that cause harm, they cause death, and they're, you know, in a lot of cases, a menace to their community. So I think that by holding people themselves responsible, hopefully that will be a way to dissuade people from even joining in the first place, and then hopefully to prevent them from creating reckless, illegal environments once they're there.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you certainly can get judgments against individuals that were responsible. But most people don't realize that fraternities and sororities are a huge business. And they're actually represented in Washington by a political action committee known, I think the name is Frat Pack.
Right.
First of all, if you're getting individual judgments against some of these people that are responsible, that's one thing. But I think the only way to stop it, and I want to know your take on this, the only way to stop it is to start taking money against the national organizations, taking money away from them, and closing down their business. Because at the end of the day, it's a business. You know, these cats that are out there that feel like this is some, you know, fun thing they're doing hazing, they're part of that business. And, you know, that's in a lot of ways, that's kind of the draw to the fraternity, the talk of come to this house and we're going to have some fun. But it is business, isn't it?
Right. Right. I mean, I think that's what the kind of rank and file fraternity members don't realize. You know, they think that they're paying dues and that maybe the dues are funding the alcohol at their parties or funding some kind of trip or something like that, upkeep of a house. But a large portion of that money is then being funneled upstream to these large national organizations that are, you know, a multi-million-dollar industry that is now seeking protection with Frat Pack, a lobbying group in Washington, D.C. And I personally find that shameful. You know, these are organizations that every time something, you know, reckless or negligent happens or there's a death or there's a sexual assault that's clearly a part of the fraternity culture, you know, they want to wash their hands of it and say that, well, you know, these are local chapters and we can't control them and you know, we just set standards and they either follow them or they don't. But they're still happy to take that money and they're still happy to use that money to try to buy whatever influence they can in Washington, D.C., you know, to keep the whole game going. And I think that you do need to have an organized effort against the national organizations in general.
They've got their lobbyists in Washington, and obviously they're doing everything they can to lobby against any kind of change on hazing laws, because that's part of the draw, isn't it? In other words, if you talk about the fraternity culture, that's part of the culture that brings the money in because it brings the members in. And it's an interesting thing. I think you've called for for fraternities to be abolished completely. Wouldn't that, though, then give rise to kind of what we see non-sanctioned fraternities, which would be even more difficult to control? Sometimes they operate off campus. I don't know how you control that if you do away with them totally. What is your take and reasoning on that?
Well, you know, I think that these colleges and universities have shown time and time again that they can't control these organizations, whether they're sanctioned, recognized entities or whether they're an off-campus, you know, rogue entity that, you know, isn't plugged into the administrative structure. I mean, fraternities in general cause a unique harm that other extracurricular or college organizations don't cause. They're incapable of causing that kind of harm, but they don't bring a unique benefit that some folks say that they do. I mean, the philanthropy that fraternities offer is not a unique benefit. I mean, I've never heard of someone being, you know, left to die on a couch in the Red Cross building, but that happens in fraternities fairly often. I think banning them is really going to be the only way that we can try to guarantee and try as best we can to prevent these types of events from happening. You know, I think that the recognition that universities offer fraternities is not just you know, symbolic, and it's not just on paper. I mean, we're talking about insurance policies that then they're allowed to get involved with, different financial incentives, student life housing, you know, incentives of being recognized, and we have to also start looking at judgments against the universities.
That's what I was going to talk about here. If they're on campus. And you know, first of all, you go after the national headquarters for that fraternity. Then the next target really is the university itself. I've got about 1 minute, and I want to ask you: isn't that where this ultimately lands? That the university itself becomes responsible for all this? Got about a minute.
I think that's where it has to land, because not only do the universities permit this type of behavior and this type of environment to happen, in fact, in some ways they encourage it and they look the other eye. I mean, in my book, Confessions of an Ivy League Frat Boy, I talk about how I brought evidence of shocking, disturbing, and dangerous hazing to the administrators at Dartmouth College, who not only looked the other way, but tried the best they could to cover it up, smear me, and dismiss my truthful claims. I think that has to stop. I think people have to start realizing that we have to go after the universities who are making this happen in the first place. And they're using fraternities to recruit their own students in the same way that fraternities themselves are trying to recruit pledges to raise money and then send that upstream to the national entities. So I think there's a lot of legal work to be done on this issue.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for joining me. Good luck out there, okay? Sounds like a big,
long-term
project. Thanks for joining me.
You bet.